Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. Today, I want to talk to you about this idea that we are bigger than our problems. What happens sometimes is we have so many things going on, and we think there are so many things wrong, and things are not going our way, that we lose ourselves. And the more away from ourselves that we get, these problems own us. We could not sleep, we could feel stress, we could feel anxious. And it's very hard to make good decisions and find new opportunities when the problems in our lives rule our lives. And this came up for me today when I was speaking to a client of mine. We were talking about a situation they were facing, and they actually said to me, Allison, you seem like you don't have any problems. You act like you don't have any problems. You seem joyful, you seem to laugh a lot, and you always seem to have a good perspective on other people's problems. And my reaction is that I laughed. I've worked with enough famous people and enough poor people and enough unemployed people and enough successful people to know that everybody has problems. And I have problems. And what was so funny about this client saying something to me about this today is I woke up to find that my daughter went back to college and she has terrible stomach problems. My other daughter is so stressed and she can't find time to study for her SATs, which are coming up in December. One of my biggest clients called this morning to tell me about all their fears and worries that they were going to lose their biggest client. And I also woke up to terrible acid reflux. Now, these are not the biggest problems I've ever had, but today these are the things that are impacting me. And it was just funny that my client said that I didn't have any problems when I woke up and literally within 15 minutes, all these things hit me at the same time. And the minute I woke up to all these problems today, it's like a wave. And if you don't catch yourself, you will lose yourself. And that's why I think this is a really good topic today, because we all know when our problems get bigger than ourselves. We could feel it because all we could think about is the problems and we can't even really feel ourselves. All we feel is the stress and the anxiety and the uncertainty of what is in front of us. And we forget that we are always bigger than our problems. And when I say that it's our essence, it's our true self. It's that place within us that's home, that's always been with us. And sometimes when something's happening in my life that's very big, that seems overwhelming, that seems life altering, life changing, I'll think about that space within myself that's never affected by what's going on. And I connect with that by thinking about the fact that I existed before this problem existed in my life. I think about when I was 5, when I was 10, when I was 15, when I was 20. I existed without this problem. And the same thing goes for you. Whatever you're facing in your life today, there probably was a time in your life that you didn't have this problem. You existed without the problem. And this is the first step because it gives us power. It gives power to our nature within us that's always been there. And it reminds us that it will exist when this problem passes. It will exist when this problem is solved. Best to take a deep breath and remind yourself of that. Remind yourself of that place that's always been with you and frankly is always okay. And the second thing we could do when our problems seem bigger than us is awareness. And the minute we create that awareness, that separateness between us and our problem, we kind of get a sense of what we can control and what we can't control. Now, we know we can control our reactions. We know that we could become more responsive. But beyond that, we also see the outer circumstances. And we can ask ourselves, what can I control and what can I control? For me this morning, there was very little that I could control. I couldn't control my daughter feeling sick. I couldn't control my daughter not being ready for the SATs in December. I couldn't control my client losing their biggest client. The only thing I could do was try to deal with my acid reflux. But the minute I saw that, what I could control and what I couldn't control, it brought me again back to myself. And the minute I was able to separate, I realized all I could do was give advice to my daughters and my client and try to help myself. In a way, it gives you more control to only focus on the things that you can control. And of course, then I would always do a maybe practice, which we could all do, because we realize that life always changes and problems change. They come and they go. And we forget that the happiness and the quality of our lives is all about how we show up for our problems. And the last thing we could do is trust ourselves and trust that we'll be okay no matter what, that we have what it takes to deal with the problems that come our way. And that's another thing. What happens when we don't think we could deal with our problems, they kind of overwhelm us. They take over all our thoughts and our entire day. But when we remind ourselves that we can handle it, that's when we become larger than the problem itself. And this actually reminded me the other day, I was going for acupuncture, and it was a new acupuncturist that I had never met before. And her room was beautiful, and I was lying in the room. And as I looked up, I saw the wall had all these cracks in it. And it was so interesting because the room was beautiful, yet there were cracks all around. And some cracks were deeper, some were lighter. And it just reminded me of our lives. That there's always something that maybe might not be perfect or the way that we wanted it to be, or maybe we have a little crack in our heart or a big crack in our heart from a pain that we felt. But the room was still intact, just like we're still intact. And we have to remember that just because we have problems, just because we have cracks, we're still okay. And that okayness helps us stay larger than our problems. And it makes us feel a type of certainty about ourselves, a sturdiness about ourselves, a resilience about ourselves that we can handle whatever we face. But when the problems get too big within our minds, we become victims. They control us. And once they control us, that's when the anxiety comes in. That's when we become overly stressed. And that's when we can't handle what's in front of us. We just have to keep working through things. And the more we do this, we'll know when to act. We'll know when to have patience. We'll know when to wait. In a way, we'll know what to do next. In one of Leonard Cohen's songs, he writes, "There's a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in." So maybe these problems that we have, instead of letting them become larger than us, they could be the place where the light comes in. If we can create a sense of our own true self and deal with them differently, then it's a place that we can cultivate wisdom instead of chaos, lessons instead of anxiety, creativity instead of fear. Because if I think about my own life, it's through my problems that I do become wiser, that I am able to learn to let go more, that I am able to feel more depth and to feel more meaning in my life. And it's not that I welcome problems, but they come. So if we avoid it, they own us. If we think about them all the time, they own us. But if we become friends with them and we understand our problems and we learn new ways to approach them, then our problems will never be bigger than us. And we might not always see them as gifts, but if they're cracks, then maybe that's where the light comes in. And maybe we just have to learn to live with our problems differently. And this idea about problems is an interesting place for me to land, because deep down for most of my life, I believed that I would outrun my problems. And one day I'd wake up and the balloons would come down and everything would be great. But the truth is, the balloons come down every day, even when you have problems. There's always something beautiful in every moment. There's always love to give. The sun always seems to rise. And for me, it's becoming less about solving my problems, but instead learning how to live with them. And also not letting them take center stage. Because even when there are problems, like I said, there's joy, there's blessings, there's happiness. And when our problems become bigger than us, we stop seeing that piece. It's all we could talk about, it's all we could think about. And that creates a bigger problem because we're not enjoying our lives, and we're not moving forward, and we're not creating. So I hope this podcast helps you think about always being bigger than your problems, through finding that sense of self, through awareness, from seeing your problems separate than you. And we can ask ourselves, what can I control and what can I control? Always remembering the maybe and trusting that you are strong and you are resilient. Even when there are cracks, you can handle it. You're stronger than you think. And everybody has problems. Some bigger, some smaller, but it's a part of life. And when we learn to relate to our problems differently, our lives really start to change. And no matter what's going on, we'll feel more joy and more love and more gratitude and more depth and more meaning, which will always lead us to living our best lives. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my book, The Gift of Maybe, it's available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.